introduction, we do have Ashley Boyle that will be moderating this discussion. She is the ILEA Napa-Sonoma VP of Communications and Auctions Relations Coordinator for Sonoma County Vintners. The panelists joining me in sharing insights today come across many facets of the event industry. I will be speaking on behalf of venues. My name is Madeline Reed, event director at Castello d'Amorosa. We have Lindsay Nickel of Lovely Day Events, Heather Nelson of Encore Events Rentals, Andrea Kowick of Girl in the Fig Catering, Tony Muzzin of NorCal Pro Sound, Misty Lane of Images by Misty Lane, Ken Sipes of Media 59, Kate Strayer of Entire Production, and Christina Ziegring of Point West Wholesale Flower Market. And with that, I will go ahead and turn this over to our moderator, Ashley Boyle.
Thank you, Madeline. I am very excited to be here today and be joined by these amazing panelists. We're really excited to start this conversation, and just want to remind everybody that this is a really supportive environment, and this conversation is really just for us to share ideas and come together and just remind each other that we're here to support one another in our industry. So if you guys have any questions along the way, please put them in the chat. I'll do my best to ask them either along the way or at the end. I will also be putting all the questions that I asked into the chat just so we can all follow along. But with that being said, I will go ahead and ask our first question. So what is the biggest challenge or challenges that you are facing as you prepare for or have held in-person events? I actually just want to hand this one right over to Madeline to start us off.
All right, thank you so much, Ashley. I think the biggest challenge for us as a venue is understanding guidelines as they're constantly evolving and effectively communicating and educating our guests about those guidelines and how we can implement, risk mitigation into their event. As a venue that has very large events. Sorry, you can hear some medieval sound effects in the back here. But as a venue that has very large events, we do have to create a plan for risk mitigation, and really with educating our guests, it is a bit of a challenge because people don't understand all of the different facets of, what goes into a safe new COVID event. So just really educating our team and our vendor team to help make sure that the guests understand what the guidelines are.
Yeah, absolutely. All of that is really important, and it's good to all be on the same page in that communication as well. Does anybody have anything to add on to that?
I'll go. So for rentals, our biggest challenge, and this will probably come up in the catering world, is labor. We obviously had to let a huge amount of staff go during the beginning of COVID. A lot were let go, and then also a lot were on furlough. So the furlough team is back, which is great. And then we're in the process of hiring more employees. But the labor pool is small, and a lot of people moved careers or they moved out of the area, and then some just don't want to come back to work. So we've been lucky enough that we have been able to get a lot of people back, but we will definitely not be at our capacity that we were in 2019. Was that when the last time we had events? So that is definitely our biggest struggle, is staff. And with that, anticipating our weekends that are already booked up, we're looking ahead for the rest of the year and seeing what events we're able to accommodate. And there's a lot of weekends that were already sold out. We had people from 2020 moving to 2021, plus all the new stuff, and even more stuff is getting booked by the day. Everyone's like, oh, great, events can happen. Like, let's plan events. But unfortunately, there's a lot of weekends that were sold out, and, anticipating that we're not going to have enough labor that we did 2 years ago, it's been really hard to navigate. So that's definitely our biggest challenge. So.
Yeah, I'll piggyback onto that since it is a similar situation for catering. Staffing, even in the couple of years leading up to this, was a challenge, and obviously this situation has just exacerbated that for all of us. And we're trying to navigate that as well, and really trying to deal with having to say no to clients when we'd like to say yes. That's a really big challenge. In getting ready for this panel, I was really fortunate that I got to spend a little time talking to both Adam from Carrie Dove Catering and Anthony from Park Avenue and kind of get their feedback as well, so we could kind of talk a little more as an industry. So in addition to everyone having the staffing issue, kind of piggybacking along with that is the fact that it feels like we're starting from scratch as a catering company. It's we're out of practice, our muscle memory is gone, and we tend to have the biggest crew on site, and so it does have a very enormous impact on the event. So just that feeling of having to start all over again, shifting gears from doing to-go food for the past year and a half almost, to full service is definitely a challenge. And a little scary going into that, and just wanting to do the best job we can. I wish I could keep that to just 2 challenges, but I think some of the other ones that we're facing are interpreting the vague guidelines for food and beverage service. While they were very specific on the food stations and buffets, we have gotten no guidance on cocktail hour. Cocktail hour and beverage service is it's very loose, and we have to figure out how to make things safe for our guests, meet guest expectations, keep our staff safe. So that's one of the other challenges. And finally, I think how to deal with that testing and vaccination for our team is another one of the big challenges, because I know when people want to increase their guest count to that full capacity, they're going to want our team to be able to provide that information. And with that staffing problem, we are going to have to rely sometimes on staffing companies, and trying to gather or put in those protocols is going to be really challenging for us. So I would say that's some of the challenges we're facing.
Wow. So what I'm hearing is we are all going to be coming together as an industry and sharing each other as some staff. So you already know I'm on board. I'm gonna hand this over to Lindsay.
Yeah, so I'm a wedding planner for those of you who have not met yet. So I think a big challenge for us is a lot of times we're like the middle person between the client and the rest of you. And the clients are always asking like, well, what will I be able to have my wedding? That was, I guess, the main one for a long time. And now they want to know like what their wedding will look like all these details that all of us as their wedding vendor team are talking about, or their event team is talking about. And it's tough not being able to have like really clear answers, supporting them and helping them like keep it together basically, because their original idea from 2019 transformed so much. Like very delicate hands basically helping them move through the process. That's probably been the biggest. Lots of us who are event planners have really, really small teams or like one person shows. So we have been fortunate to not be dealing with the staffing situation that the bigger companies are in. So like for all of you and looking for staff, I couldn't even imagine trying to build back your like really big team, but you're all doing a great job.
Thank you, Lindsay. Ken. Oh, did you hear me, Ken? I'm calling on you, Ken.
Okay. For us, it's really been, what we've been doing is dealing with very small groups, 6 people, very small, intimate backyard weddings, et cetera. But one of the things that has shown up for us, and I'm sure Tony can relate to this as well, is that whenever going into this, what's next, it's a really simple thing for us. Obviously, we want to have an understanding of the rules and regulations, but for us, it's this thing called a microphone. During the last year, some of the things that we did do, we always had a microphone on a stand, and we always put a chair between the microphone and the person speaking. So they'd be far enough away from it so no one would share any fluids. And then we'd also have to clean everything off as far as lav mics and everything else. But going forward, we don't know, because it's part of it is educating the clients what we can do and can't do, because we're, like the wedding planner or a photographer, we're right up with the client doing things. So, you get into have you had the vaccines, where are they at? How close do you want to get? So there's a lot of communication that we do with the client right in the whole booking process, because they have concerns. Like if they got a grandmother who's wearing a face shield on top of a mask, is the microphone even going to pick her up? So it's just minute things like that for us. It's not big, as a planner, as a caterer, as a venue, there's so many bigger pieces you have to work with. For us, it's the minutia of how do we deal with the couples and educate the couples in what is really required, so we're not stepping on anybody else's toes or doing anything else. Tony, you want to jump in on that? And now the Rented spacebar doesn't work. Sorry.
Tony's mute.
Thanks a lot, Ken. Using the spacebar. The challenge, yeah, I mean, we have similar challenges that Ken is referring to. But one of the challenges that I've kind of recently discovered is, well, there's two. One is we work in many different counties, and it seems like each county has their own ordinances. And so it's kind of a, going, for one day working in Napa County and the next day working in Mendocino County, we're looking at two different sets of rules. And, so it's up to us to contact the venue and figure out what they're expecting from us as far as, complying. The other challenge is, we're DJs and our job is to make people dance. And how do you do a wedding where there's no dancing allowed and people are showing up going, oh, this is a wedding. We're going to dance, and the venue might not be able to allow that. And how do you program music in a fashion that doesn't, we spent our whole lives trying to make people learn how to make people dance, and now we got to go in the opposite direction. So it's a little bit against our genetic code, I guess you could say, as DJs. But you kind of roll with it. I did a wedding last Saturday where they weren't initially wanting dancing, but then it was the day after the change in rules, I guess. And so we had dancing. But leading up to that, I was scratching my chin going, how am I going to pull this off and give the couple what they're looking for as far as music, but not encourage people to totally rock out on the dance floor. And so that's a big challenge for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Tony, was your wedding in Half Moon Bay? Because I went to a wedding last Saturday that the exact same thing happened. They weren't playing dancing music and people still wanted to dance, but it happens. Awesome. So I'm gonna hand it over to Misty.
I'm gonna jump on what Andrea said. What I'm finding is I'm feeling like I have to start over. I've not stopped working in the past year. Old clients have come back trying to give me work, and I absolutely appreciate that. But I do feel like I kind of have to start over, and definitely putting myself out there and reminding people, reminding clients, reminding, whomever may be of assistance that I'm still here. In regards to dealing with COVID, I've just mostly been mirroring what the clients want. Always masked and safe and all of that. But it's more, for me, it's been a very quiet year, and now feeling like, ooh, I got to jump back into this and I got to jump in hard. But then, when you're working by yourself, you always go back and forth. Your mind waffles. Oh, it's going to be a great year. Oh, it's not going to be a good year. So it's a lot of just more me putting myself out there and trying to understand and calm myself down.
Yeah, absolutely. Kate, do you have something to add on to that as well?
Well, I think everybody's brought up a lot of great points and some things that definitely, you know, are challenges that I'm facing and our kind of industry and business is facing currently as well. And I would say actually there are multiple challenges that we're facing right now. And of course, I'm sure we'll touch on a lot of them during the course of this panel. But I think just to, you know, something that I'm currently super challenged with is kind of similar to what Madeline and Tony were talking about in terms of just keeping up with the various guidelines, especially as someone who, you know, lives in Napa, works for a company based in San Francisco, and plans events, you know, all over California, if not nationally. I mean, you're looking at not only you know, state guidelines, but then the county, the city, perhaps even the specific venue within that city. So it can just really become very granular and picky and difficult to keep track of. And especially if you're, you know, looking particularly at weddings, which are planned, you know, maybe more than a year out in advance, there's just nothing that we can assume will be true anymore. So we can say like, oh, here are the guidelines now, but we don't necessarily need to plan for these specific guidelines because it's not going to be the same in a year, but we have no idea what it's going to look like in a year. So I think, you know, in our business, something that we take very seriously is just making sure that we are advocating on behalf of the artists and the musicians and the performers that we are pitching and booking, right? And so making sure that we are communicating effectively to the planners, and therefore, you know, so the planners can communicate to the clients what the musicians or the bands or whatever will need in terms of stage size or plot size, or do they need plexiglass installed around them? Like how much space needs to be between them and the guests? You know, are they going to be served vendor meals? How is that going to be prepared, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think, you know, all of that just gets so granular and tricky that, you know, the main challenge is just making sure that I am advocating for the correct with the correct information. I think something that was really helpful to me earlier last year was that there was like a shared community Google Sheet document that was going around amongst the event industry. I think it was called the Event Marketer's Guide to Going Virtual. And they had all these different tabs, and like some of the tabs were, you know, best practices for producing virtual events, or, you know, all the different web platforms and things like that that were coming out. And it's like what their best uses, this is best for a virtual conference, or this is best for, you know, a social event, or, you know, all that stuff. And it was just super helpful to have something that was absolutely free to join and just a shared resource amongst event profs. And of course, like CDC and all these, you know, websites are coming out with the guidelines currently, or, you know, will usher them out as they change. But I think having that access to some kind of shared event industry document, highlighting the various guidelines within various counties or cities or something could just be, you know, really valuable resource. And I'm not volunteering myself to start it, but just something like that would be a bit more helpful than like needing to go to like a .gov website every time, you know, you're planning a particular event.
Madeline says, sounds like maybe you are? Question mark?
Definitely not. Definitely not.
I was not able to see the original document you were talking about, but I think that's an amazing idea. So maybe we'll take it back to the board and see if someone wants to start something like that and start sharing it. Because
Just as a quick aside, one of our main focuses this year as a board for ILEA Napa-Sonoma has been to support the community. And so we haven't been charging for most of our programs, including like this program, anything that we can do to really get as much information out there as possible. And I think that, Kate, that's a great idea. And maybe we could just start a Google document. We do have another panel planned with other heads of organizations like NACE and WIPA and WICSEP where we'll be sharing more so that we have a united front, at least in Napa-Sonoma Bay Area, on how to best execute events and how to represent ourselves as well.
Yeah, thank you, Madeline. So stay tuned is what I'm hearing. Christina, do you have something to add as well into this list of challenges that we all seem to be facing?
Oh boy, yes, I have a bunch. Thank you for having me. I feel like it's really important to share what is going on in the industry. And the floral industry has definitely been affected by the shutdowns. And what we've seen, we were able to predict months and months ago, and that is in regard to supply and procurement. Right now, most of the flowers that florists are using are coming from different parts of the world, whether it be Holland, New Zealand, Colombia, Ecuador, and a great deal of it came from California as well. Right now, what we're seeing starting with the Southern Hemisphere is really bad weather. And a lot of the cargo companies that would ship these flowers have gone out of business. So we're seeing huge shortages in flowers around the world. And this is expected to last for another 6 months to a year. In California, we are having some smaller farms pop up, but they don't provide enough for the colors and varieties that everyone is looking for. Usually when florists are designing, everyone is using the same color palette and they're all wanting the same flower varieties, anemones, hydrangeas, ranunculus. It's just come to the point where there isn't much of it out there. And the other thing that is affecting floral designers right now is the cost. Roses, for instance, have gone from let's say $1 a stem to $2.50 a stem. So the cost of flowers has jumped up there, and that's not generally the real pricing. That's just an example, but that's what we're seeing right now in terms of availability. So we have Mother's Day creeping up on us too, where Mother's Day is the busiest holiday for floral designers, busier than Valentine's Day. And that means that coupled with events starting to open up again, and Mother's Day and these little micro holidays, flowers are in really high demand, but there's nothing available because when the shutdowns happened, the farmers stopped producing. They had to lay off their staff, and they just didn't plant any crops. So it takes sometimes 6 months for a flower to bloom. And sometimes it even takes up to 2 years, depending on what the flower is, for one stem of flower. And what we're asking is that moving forward, everybody know about it. So like if there's a event planner working with a client, they can just let their client know, hey, can we not be so specific on the flower variety and just go for the look and feel that you're going for? It's been a challenge and a struggle, and most florists have been very accepting and understanding of it. However, their clients are still wanting what they want and they see on Instagram and Pinterest. And oftentimes these images that they see are way undervalued. So now, especially with the florists that have booked events in the past, it's going to be really hard for them to recover because flowers have basically doubled in price. And events that they quoted and wrote contracts for still need to be honored. So that's what we're facing right now.
Wow. I had no idea how extreme the flower shortage was. That's crazy. So thank you everybody for sharing all of your challenges. And as we go into the next question, which is going to be for all of our panelists, Christina, I do actually kind of want to start with you for this one. Just you kind of briefly touched on it already, but I think you would be a good segue into this. So the question is, what is the #1 area of support you are finding you need from fellow vendors as you collaborate with the vendor team to successfully execute the event?
That would have to be with a little bit of flexibility. I know that contracts might have been written a year ago, but availability isn't the same. It's not up to us, it's Mother Nature. We've had a lot of bad weather here in California as well. We had some late frost, which means that product that was planted 6 months ago might have been wiped out. So just letting the clients know that they're lucky enough to have flowers at this point in time is really helpful. And myself as a wholesaler, all of the wholesalers are working together to try and pull off these events for floral designers. So sometimes wholesalers will have orders on a standing order, which means that every single week we're expecting to see the same product. Wholesalers are starting to share a little bit of that with other wholesalers. I love Mayish. We worked with them when I can't find something. I always run to them for help, and they come and give us what they have when they can. And it's not always doable, but I know that roses are going to be in huge limited supply, carnations, palms. It's just working together in that regard and just educating the people and letting them know what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Does anybody want to jump in and add anything on here?
Yeah, I had actually a question because we do a small amount of floral design in-house in conjunction with our event planning and catering. If we could steer a client in a certain direction for availability, for cost, what would you recommend that we go for?
Oh boy, that's a loaded question because there's a million things that can go wrong in any given day. When we're working with wholesale, it could be weather, transportation, a truck gets held up somewhere, or it's trying to cross the border and agriculture stops it because there's one bug in a box that requires the entire truck to be destroyed. It's anything that can happen. So if you are moving your client into a certain direction, I would say it's flexibility. Don't make any promises for any flower variety. Certain color tones like the toffee colors, caramel colors are really just now becoming popular. It usually takes like 5 to 10 years for a flush of product to become readily available. So for a while it was the blush tones, and now we have so much blush that we'll always have that color. So maybe suggesting that blush come back into fashion for another couple of years might be a good thing. But yeah, the novelty colors, blush and novelty flowers are something that I wouldn't make promises on. Apart from that, local product is amazing. Here in Sonoma County in the summertime, 90% of our cooler and the flowers that we provide for weddings and events come from California or Sonoma County. And the local farmers are definitely amping it up. I've put the word out there. I'm like, hey, can we double the supply this year? Because demand is super high. So that's what I would recommend, is just flexibility and moving toward a style and design and not making any promises.
It looks like we could try to sell our clients on local flowers.
Local is good, yes, but we still, like, the world has their flowers provided by a lot of South American products. So I don't want to take that business away from them 100% because they need it to sustain and survive. I love local products. I want that to be what we go for, but it's just not ready yet. Seasonal too, that's another word I just thought. Seasonal local flowers are coming our way. So a lot of sunflowers, we're just ending in the ranunculus season that won't be available year round anymore. Anemones are going to be ending soon too. And those are some really popular flower varieties that everyone wants. We can still pull flowers from Washington and Oregon and the West Coast, but anything coming from the East Coast is going to be having a harder time getting here.
Yeah, absolutely. And Katie has an amazing suggestion. On Wednesdays, we wear blush. That way we can bring that trend back. We love it. Kate, I think you had your hand raised a little bit ago to add in some insight.
Yeah, I also just want to mention that there was a lot of blush at my wedding and it wasn't too long ago. So I think it looks great. So yeah, just in terms of support from fellow vendors, I mean, these are really human things that I think that, you know, patience, understanding, and empathy, right? I mean, we're all going through very unique challenges, but at the same time, all functioning within an industry that are facing very similar challenges. So I think that's something that we've become, you know, well aware of over the past year and still currently, is that everyone has different comfort levels when it comes to returning back to in-person and indoor events. And this is especially the same for any, you know, musicians or bands. Everyone is human and wants to ensure their safety, the safety of others, perhaps the safety of their family members or the people that they live with, etc. So this could mean that, you know, some people ask for additional safety precautions that maybe aren't necessarily required by the county or aren't being taken for other vendors or guests, but perhaps like larger space requirements for dance floors or things like that. And, you know, I think now that we're seeing a light at the end of the tunnel regarding vaccinations and things like that, this is not going to be like a massive issue, but you never know what someone's comfort level might be, and putting a hired vendor in an uncomfortable situation is just not going to end well for anyone, right? So I think a little empathy goes a long way as we all try and navigate, you know, our way through this return. And then patience as it pertains, especially to response times. So COVID obviously spurred a lot of change, especially for those whose livelihoods depended on live performances, so weddings, corporate events, etc. So I'm finding that some people are super raring to go and can get back to me quickly, or willing to work on price, you know, like, yes, we're available, we're so available, like, please book me for this event. But others may be occupied with other day jobs now, or aren't checking their, you know, very specific band email inquiries all that often, you know, like if they have a separate Gmail account, you know, things like that. So some bands may have even lost band members, whether that's figuratively or literally. I even had an inquiry for a band the other week, I think from Lindsay, and that band seems to have dropped off the face of the earth. Their emails that I have I'm getting bounce backs, their website is gone, the phone number isn't working, I can't contact them on Facebook. So it may just be that they are no longer a band anymore. I honestly have no idea. So I think, you know, a lot of clients and planners are expecting super speedy replies, as is the industry norm. You know, we work super quickly, but I think, again, a little patience would be super appreciated while we, you know, try and track down people who are still figuring out how performing fits in with, you know, whatever the structure of their life is right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Madeline had her hand up first, so I'll pass this over to Madeline.
So just to kind of piggyback on what Kate was saying about communication, I think it's really important for all vendors to really be on the same page prior to entering into an event. Talking about safety guidelines together, how you are going to interact with each other, and really communicating that ahead of time is important. I also think that right now, some people may, like Kate was saying, be really eager to get back into business. Some people may be waiting a little bit, but I think that one thing as a community that we can do to support each other is realize that a lot more resources are going into planning events now. It's more expensive now. It's, of course, we all have to have a piece of the business, but couple of things. Number one, don't undersell yourself as a vendor, because there is so much more that's going into planning events. And number two, undercutting other vendors, which, the thing is, we all have to be in business, of course, but be cautious about that, because it sets a standard for the industry. Okay, so if caterer A can do this for $150, why can caterer B do it for $13, per person? Really kind of communicating what you are offering as a vendor, and what that pricing is, and trying not to undercut so much, because I think we as an industry, it will benefit us better if we can support each other more and communicate more.
Yeah, absolutely. Heather, did you want to add on to that?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts. Speaking with Kate about response time, I mean, even for us, like our sales team is slammed. Like if you guys can imagine, the floodgates have opened, events are now, able to happen, and we're just slammed. The phones between graduations and backyard events and weddings. And so again, being, respective of that, we will get back to you. It's just, we need a little bit more time. And as we build our staff back up. And then just to touch on pricing and increasing, I think that is something that we don't really talk about. We did do a price increase this year. We didn't do one last year. We didn't do one the year before. And unfortunately, the cost of labor, I mean, we have to pay guys more now because they can be on unemployment. So we need to give them incentives to come back to work. And then also gas prices have gone up. We can't get product. If we need to add more chairs to our inventory or tables, all the cost for delivering for that is, in a high demand as well. So there's reasons why our costs are higher. And it's not just because, oh, well, we were closed for a year, we're trying to make up for it. No, the cost of things, has gone up, and the touch time on things like cleaning things. And so there's just a lot that goes into it. So I think just being honest with your clients about why the prices have gone up is always helpful. And then I think the other thing that I just wanted to touch on is what we can do as a vendor team is obviously knowing what each other's struggles are. And so I think having this time today gives us a little bit of insight of what every vendor is kind of struggling with, and being honest with your clients about what the reality really is for us, and knowing, how can we work together? I would say what we are experiencing too is a lot of people are moving dates, but not checking with their vendors to see availability. So it might work for the planner, or it might work for the venue that those dates are able to move, but all the other vendors might be booked. And so if we've already have contracts and we already have orders with them, it's really hard to navigate that and being able to accommodate their delivery and pickup times for us. And the last thing is just for vendors, especially venues, is being flexible where we can for delivery and pickup, because we're trying to make it all happen. And so the more flexibility we can have on that end, the better. Just, as this year, as we get back to getting back to work and making those changes, is being, being accommodating to those requests.
Yeah, absolutely. Lindsay, and pass that over to you. Looks like you have your hand raised.
Yeah, Madeline started to talk about what I was going to talk about, but I feel like the communication of really getting everybody on the same page before you present the idea or whatever the format will be to the client. So specifically, I know we're all very confused about dancing right now, getting on everybody knowing what the what will happen for each specific event, because it really is varying from event to event. We all know like each one can look completely different, even if it's one is on Friday and one is on Saturday. So just making sure, the whole vending team knows, is it going to be dancing or no dancing? Is it plated or family style food? Is it going to be, I don't know, napkin roll-ups, or what, how's the silverware going to be handled? And so that when it comes to the client, or if the client, they all go around and like, they say, ask the wedding planner one thing, but maybe they didn't like that answer. So then they're going to go to the caterer and find out what the caterer's answer is. Merely making sure everybody's on the same page so that the client is receiving the same information from everybody, and just managing those expectations. And if you haven't heard from some of your vendors, like definitely reach out. There's like a saying going around, like check on your strong friends or something like that. Like check on all of the other vendors that you work with usually, and definitely the ones that you have for events coming up, because you just never know what other people are going through, like in their own lives, that you might not see portrayed on social media or in, Zooms and things like that.
Yeah, check in on your buddies is very important. Andrea.
Yeah, everyone has such great points here. I mean, I think over the past few years, because of fires and then COVID, I think we've all really learned how to work as a team together and have those conversations prior to the client. But I think I would like to also just emphasize that, like, if we can have those powwows before presenting to the client, just like Lindsay said. One of the other things is like, maybe we can all really figure out creative ways. The client may understand this, but who's explaining it to the guests? So I think having creative ways to explain how this event is going to go, like a fun sheet of paper, maybe that can be given out at the welcome beverage station that says, we're so happy that we're able to host you now. Here's what we need from you to have a safe event. And whether that's, oh, once you get your hors d'oeuvres, please go sit at your table. Explain to the guests so that people aren't having to walk around policing. And on that note, let's not make that just one person's responsibility. While technically, a lot of this falls to the venue, it shouldn't be the venue having to be the bad guy at the event. Like, we should all be working together to make sure that the guests are interacting safely, to keep both all of us safe and the other guests.
Yeah, everybody's in this together. And so if we can communicate the same message and all be supportive. And I think as a guest, like, I went to a wedding last weekend, and I'm like the worst wedding guest on the planet. I didn't follow any of the rules, and I know all the rules. And I will say that all of the staff were very, very friendly, and everybody was on the same page and had the same message. And it made things, just a little bit easier as a horrible wedding guest. I know, horrible. Thank you, Andrea. So I'm going to pass this over to Misty.
Everybody's already said what I would say. Kate really covered it with patience, and just, I find I'm probably going to be communicating far more with all the fellow vendors before an event than perhaps I did before, just so that we are all on the same page, that we walk in and we understand how everyone is feeling, because everyone will have a different sort of, bubble that they want to live in. I'm trying to help my own community, photography community, in whatever way possible. A friend asked if I could fill in for him if he wasn't feeling well from his second COVID shot. Yes, I'm not going to say no when something like that pops up. I have to say yes. So it's just a matter of working together and the patience, and I'm just going to try and support as much as I can, because I'm kind of on the tail end, and it's all sort of done before I get there. Sorry. But yeah, basically everyone has said everything already.
Thank you. Looks like Tony is answering a few questions in the chat. So Anthony asked if we know what the status is for dancing. Tony, I'm going to just hand it over to you if you want to briefly touch on that, and then also touch on the question as well.
I'm sorry, did you say me?
Yeah.
Oh, well, my understanding is that In certain spaces, dancing is allowed if you wear a mask and somehow stay 6 feet apart. In other spaces, you don't have to worry about a mask. You don't have to stay 6 feet apart. The other thing to think about is it outside? Is dancing going to be outside, or is dancing going to be inside? If dancing is outside, I don't think the rules are quite as strict. But again, it comes down to the space you're working at, the venue. The venue may have its own set of rules that they want to be over compliant. So I think whenever I go to, whatever events that we have going, we're going to make sure we contact the venue and just double check and not assume anything. But somebody brought up a point that, even though we're going to be following the rules and, touching base with the venue and working really well with everyone, it comes down, are the guests going to respect that? Are they going to cooperate? I was talking to a venue owner who's a little bit concerned because he wants to have his events. He wants everyone to have a good time, and he wants everyone to be able to dance if it's allowed. But if it's not allowed, he doesn't want to be the dancing police or the mask police. So I can see that being super stressful, not just for DJs or for other vendors, but the venue itself has really got a lot of liability factors they got to take into consideration. And so that's my answer to that.
Sorry, it started talking with me on mute. Yeah, absolutely. It is a challenge. Ken, did you want to add on to that as well?
Well, for me, I mean, the dancing thing is really something Tony and the venue have to have understand it. But I like, the conversation of all the vendor team who's on site the day of the wedding, really understanding what and how we're going to approach guests when things are happening. If masks have to be worn, I mean, how are we going to decide that? Is the wedding planner going to take the lead and educate everybody? It's going to come from the venue. I have no problem jumping in, but if we all have to do it or no one has to do it, you can't. It's got to be. I don't know. It's like an example of there's a wedding at a venue, and client was there. They had a flask. They were drinking it, and one of the assistants to the wedding planner said, "I'll take that," and then she dumped it out, and then she handed it back. And that's what you're supposed to do, because that is not allowed at the venues. But how emboldened is everybody going to be? And to me, that's an issue. Is like at what level do we all take on that, and do we all agree? Because I think we should, but it's like, how do we take that on as a group of partners? Because vendors is not even a word to use here. We're all partners in this. So how do we take that on, and so everybody knows that everybody else has everybody else's back? To me, that's going to be the challenge, that we all are on the same page.
Yeah, and if we all have open communication before the event starts, I know that I personally would feel more comfortable approaching a guest about a situation if I knew that everybody else on my team / the partners that are there on site also feel the exact same way as well. So that would empower me to feel comfortable to, step up and, put my foot down, I guess, but nicely. Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. Maybe we'll have time for 2 more questions, but I definitely want to get to the third question, and this is going to be for everybody on the panel. The third question is, what are some of the main questions or issues that you are hearing working with clients, or that you're hearing, or when you're working with clients to resolve? Does anybody want to jump in and take this one right off the bat?
I can.
Okay.
I will.
Go, Andrea.
Go ahead. No, I was just going to say, I think the biggest question we're getting right now is what's going to be different after June 15th. That's the big one. And then specifically for catering is more just like, how do we do certain elements of food and service that haven't been addressed, which I think I addressed in the first one. So I would imagine most people are getting those questions about events later in the year as well. And I'm just trying to kind of hold off on those clients who are in August, September, and just say, let's have this conversation after we know a little more, because I have already planned your event 4 times. I mean, obviously I don't say that to them, but I've already planned their event 4 times. I would like to hold off from doing it a 5th time till we actually know what's happening. So that's all.
Yeah, absolutely. Lindsay, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was just going to jump in, like similar to what Andrea said, just thinking between now and June 15th, what we're seeing clients say is they're confused about the dancing. You know, like, can we do it? Can we not do it? The mask, the social distancing. Also, you know, there's the venues rules or guidelines, which might be tighter or looser than the state. And then the client also saying like, but we saw this from the state. So they're trying to like, what does that mean in their heads? So that's a big confusing point for them. And then what was the third thing I wrote down? Those were probably the biggest things, you know, the same things that we're confused about, they're also confused about, but they don't have experience in the event industry. So it's 10 times more confusing for them. And then I think just, again, guiding them and having everybody on the same page so that if they do ask the caterer and then they ask the venue, that they're getting the same answer from everybody will go a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. Kate, you know, you were gonna say something at the beginning there. Pass it over to you.
Great. I would say basically, and this is a pretty recent issue actually that my team has been encountering specifically with end clients, is availability issues. Availability is not necessarily confirmed just because we've been out of live events for so long. As I'm sure a lot of people know, you know, even though a lot of 2020 dates were canceled, a fair amount of those were already postponed to later dates in either 2021 or even 2022. So even though, you know, especially weddings right now are planning for 2022, a lot of availability is already booked up. And so, you know, I would say we're probably looking even now at like, do you want to start planning for 23 or 24? Because some of these, you know, top wedding groups that people may have had their heart set on for so long may not be available to them. I mean, we recently had a groom client with, you know, money to spend, and he was really trying to throw money at the situation, being like, well, will this band be available for an extra, you know, $10,000? Like, I'll really like give them as much money as I have. And it's like, that's not the issue. You know, they're not going to cancel on another client just because you're throwing money at them. Or for instance, you know, kind of bigger band was booked for a Friday in an event in New York and then needed to be in Hawaii on Sunday. And some couple is trying to book them for an event, you know, in California on Saturday. So that is just not logistically possible, especially right now in terms of travel. It's also not logistically possible just like for a human, right? Like you can't just do that kind of quick turnaround. And I think end clients are really like, okay, they're like, we're finally able to plan our wedding. This is going to be the day of our dreams. And then they're kind of not expecting that things are not just going to be on a silver platter for them. So I think that especially planners can really help by setting expectations with the client that, you know, they're just not going to have maybe 100% of available options to them for any particular date. We may need to get creative with who else is available. Or if your clients had their heart set on someone, maybe they want to move the date, you know, if it's really that important to them. But I think, yeah, availability is something that we're kind of running into right now, and it's causing some personal tensions.
Yeah, we all have to take a little bit of personal time between traveling and not just go back to back to back playing concert playing. That's crazy. But that's great that you guys are able to stay strong and put your foot down to that one. Tony, I'm going to pass this over to you next.
Ready. I forgot what the question was.
The question is, what are some of the main questions or issues that you are hearing while you're working with clients?
It's mainly dancing, you know, and sometimes how many guests can we have? And again, my answer is just kind of depends on what their layout is and, you know, where their venue is and what county it's in. Yeah, I don't really have, I have a few questions, I guess, that come up about rescheduling, you know, and why is there a rescheduling fee and, you know, things like that. But it's mainly dancing. Yeah. We haven't really, we don't, I guess we don't get hit with a lot of questions. People don't even really call us. We get emails mostly. And it's mostly how much do you charge and that kind of thing. I think somebody said something that I totally agree with, that they don't have experience in the event industry, so they don't know what's really going on behind the scenes or what the rules are or how things work. And so, you know, I just don't get a whole lot of questions other than the dancing thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, Anthony is saying most of my couples are generally appreciative and flexible right now and are happy to be able to plan their event for this year. Yeah, absolutely. Heather, I'm going to turn this one over to you.
We don't get too many questions about stuff. Everyone's just, you know, just booking anything that they can. I think the biggest thing is like cancellations, you know, what is our cancellation policy if they have to change and those kinds of things. I think one thing that has come up actually in our staff world is I know there's a lot of talk about having like servers and vendors being tested for COVID on site and like what that process is. And as we deliver to venues, because we're usually at the venues before guests are there. And just knowing like what our protocol is as drivers, like do they have to get tested on site when they deliver is something that we're kind of navigating through. We do check every employee when they get to work. They have to get temperature checked and we have to sign off. And so we already do that as a company. But just curious to, you know if that's going to come down the pipelines of like, are the guys going to have to like get their temperature checked at every single job site and just, you know, working through those issues.
Yeah, that's a good question. I didn't even think about that one for you guys. Misty.
What I'm finding is mostly about flexibility. Some people still want to change their dates because, you know, they have their heart set on a 200-person wedding and they don't want to give that up. So I don't want to do June. Can I do June next year? Of course, you know, I'm not going to say no. Some of them seem to want to break the rules. Are you okay with that? Some will say, I'm having 80 guests, but I might have 150 guests. Will that matter? Well, of course it matters, because then I have to plan for another photographer and it's a lot more work and it's just different. So what I'm coming across is just mostly flexibility.
Yeah, definitely. And that kind of comes into play with, I forget who said it, where, you know, we've all got to check in with all of our vendor partners and make sure that everybody is able to, you know, be flexible together, I should say. Madeline, I'm going to hand this over to you now. Oh, you're still on.
Okay, here we go. I'm off mute now. All right, excellent. I think as a venue and also I think for planners, we are fielding most of the major questions. And obviously I'm not a wedding planner, but we plan most of the events here at the castle for our clients. And so we're fielding most questions, and it really has to do with what are the safety guidelines that are in place at at our venue? What are you doing proactively to mitigate any risk of spread? Do we have to follow those guidelines? And really explaining that the governing body is not, in our case, the castle, but the venue. It's the state and the county. And so really educating guests about what the current guidelines are. It's definitely a challenge because people, this is a destination, so people come from all over the country, used to be all over the world, but right now all over the country, and different states have different guidelines. And so I think that the questions are really surrounding the guidelines. And right now, what we're doing to kind of proactively communicate is kind of telling everyone what the a synopsis of what the general guidelines are. For anyone that is a ILEA Napa-Sonoma member, you should have received a synopsis of the guidelines as they are as of April 15th. From us. And if you do need that, I believe it's on our resources page on ILEANapaSonoma.com. But really communicating those guidelines, showing them it's not, us kind of creating this. Of course, we are doing whatever is the law essentially, or the guidelines of the county. So that's what we're doing to be proactive and most of the questions that we're getting.
Awesome, thank you. And then Ken, I'm gonna hand it over to you.
Okay, the only real question I get, well, it's a combination. It falls back on what are the current rules, like everybody else is getting. But the bigger one again is really about what are your change fees, what's your contract if we have to postpone, we have to do that again, et cetera. Those are the things that people ask me. I'm kind of far down the list. They've already talked to the venue, they've already talked to the planner, caterers, et cetera. So for me, it's really it's a contract issue because they hear all the horror stories of people that lost their retainers or deposits or whatever, and that's their concern.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I really appreciate all the panelists' insight and willingness to answer all these questions so openly and share with each other. I do want to open it up to see if anybody else has any questions in the audience. You can either type them in the chat or you can unmute yourself and ask your question. I'm reading, so Betty said that she's finding with her out-of-state area clients that they're surprised at the restrictions we have. I have noticed that as well. I've been on the phone with a lot of people from out of California and they're like, what? You can't do what? So really important for people coming out of state to be able to educate them and just let them know what we have going on here, and it's not going to last forever. Awesome. Well, if we don't have any other questions, I'm going to hand it over to Madeline for some closing remarks. And if something comes up, feel free to put it in the chat or you can email any of us. I'm sure anybody would be very open to answering questions via email. But Madeline, take it away.
All right, guys. Yeah, there's a lot of education that has to go around to guests that are from outside of the state. California has the highest population. We have 40 million people. So there are different guidelines that apply to us to make sure that all of our inhabitants are safe. So thank you to all of the panelists. Really appreciate everyone taking the time today. I think it's really important that we support each other as a community. And it's not just us being vendors. Like Ken said, we are partners, and partners have to communicate constantly and effectively. And so I am so grateful for everyone for being a part of this today and in the months to come. We have our first in-person event coming up in April on April 28th, 6 days away at 4 p.m. We have 12 spots available. It is a floral arranging workshop with Lace and Willow at Point West Wholesale Flower Market. There is a virtual option, so you can pick up a floral kit and watch and learn. You can watch and learn also without a kit, but flowers make it more fun. So again, that's April 28th at 4 p.m. Registration is required. In May, we have an ILEA and NACE multi-chapter collaboration. The Hot List is an incredible live show that is a can't miss. It's an annual event. After a year, we'd like to put everything behind us, and Michael Cervelli is back to share some more hot ideas plus hot topics like the state of the industry. Join us virtually on All Seated Expo. The event is on Tuesday, May 18th from 5:30 to 7:30. And then we have an upcoming Strengthen Your Community event. Honestly, never has community been more important. And so we will be joined by Kristen Seaholm, the WIPA president, Jamie Lagoida from WICSUP, Diana Cardenas from NACE Silicon Valley, and myself as well, where we will talk about, really how your network is your net worth. And so please join us for that. Please do check out our website and social media for registrations and any updates. And with that, thank you all for joining us today. Again, really appreciate everyone and looking forward to hopefully a more positive and fruitful year.